So let's talk about Franz Kafka. You've definitely heard the name, right? He's considered one of the most important writers of the 20th century. But here's the crazy part. While he was alive, nobody knew who he was. Like, at all. A complete unknown.
So who was this guy really? Well, on the outside, his life looked, well, kind of boring. He was an insurance lawyer in Prague, dealing with endless paperwork and red tape. But underneath all that, his mind was this whirlwind of paranoia and dread and just feeling totally alienated. And he used it to create fiction that was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. So that's the big question here, isn't it? If he lived and died as a total nobody, how on earth do we all know his name today? Well, the answer, weirdly enough, starts with a tyrant in his own house.
Yeah, to really get Kafka, you don't start with his books. You have to start in his childhood home. And it all comes down to the most defining relationship of his life. The oppressive, just crushing presence of his father, Herman.
I mean, just look at the difference here. The gap between what his dad, Herman, wanted and who Franz actually was, it was a canyon. Herman was this huge, self-made man with a booming personality, and he wanted a son who was just like him, strong, confident, a real man's man. But instead, he got Franz, who was small and anxious and super creative. Right from day one, in his father's eyes, he was just a huge disappointment. And this wasn't just some quiet disapproval. His father's disappointment was loud. It was cruel. Herman would just explode at him for nothing, constantly belittling him. We're talking about constant emotional abuse that just completely hollowed out his self-esteem. So all this pressure, right, both at home and at his super strict school, it left a scar. It created what we'd now call a severe anxiety disorder. And Kafka's description of it is just perfect. He said it felt like a ball of wire right in the middle of his body, just winding tighter and tighter. And that feeling, well, that's what would fuel his entire life's work. But here's the thing, and this is so important. Kafka didn't just crumble under all this pain. He channeled it. His anxiety became the engine for his creativity. And that engine got kicked into overdrive by a really chaotic, long-distance love affair. Okay, check out this timeline because it's wild. August 1912, he meets a woman named Felice Bauer. Just 6 weeks later, 6 weeks, he's so supercharged by the emotions of writing letters back and forth with her that he sits down and writes his first masterpiece, The Judgment, in one single feverish night. The whole emotional roller coaster of their relationship, they were on again, off again, lines up perfectly with his most creative period ever. It's when he gives us the Metamorphosis and his most famous novel, The Trial. And yeah, The Trial is probably the best example of Kafka's genius. It's the story about a man who gets arrested, but he's never told what crime he's committed. And because it's so vague, it's become this perfect mirror for all our modern fears. Is it about religious guilt, anti-Semitism, soul-crushing bureaucracy? The answer is kind of all of them and none of them, and that's what makes it so timeless. So you have this explosion of creative genius, but at the same time, his personal life was just completely falling apart. And his constant anxiety was about to get a whole lot worse, thanks to a physical illness that would basically seal his fate. The year 1917. That was the beginning of the end. He gets diagnosed with tuberculosis. And you have to remember, back then, this wasn't something you just managed. It was a death sentence. It had killed so many people, and Kafka knew it was going to kill him too. So getting sick just made him even more isolated. His engagement to Felice, it ended for good. He had other relationships with women like Julie Horizek and Malina Jasenska, but they all fell apart too. And every single failure was haunted by either his father's disapproval or his own crippling insecurity. He was just getting more and more alone. Then, in this one last kind of desperate attempt to be understood, he wrote a 45-page letter to his father. He tried to explain the lifetime of fear that his dad had put inside him. It was like his own personal verdict on the man who raised him. But then, in the most perfectly Kafkaesque twist, he was too terrified to actually send it. So, let's just recap. He's sick, he's alone, and he's totally convinced he's a failure. His story should have ended right there, buried in obscurity, but this is where the story takes a wild turn that literally changed the history of literature forever. As he was dying, Kafka turned to his best friend, really his only friend, Max Brod, and he gave him one simple, devastating instruction. Take every single thing I've written that hasn't been published, all my novels, all my major works, and burn them. Burn it all, leave nothing behind.
Just let that sink in for a second. The Trial, The Castle, America. Basically everything we know him for today was supposed to go up in smoke. His entire legacy was meant for the fire. But Max Brod, he knew something Kafka couldn't see in himself. He knew his friend was an absolute genius. And so, he made a decision that would change everything. He betrayed his best friend's dying wish.
So what did he do instead? After Kafka died in 1924, Brod didn't light a single match. He carefully organized all those manuscripts. And then in 1925, he published The Trial. The Castle came out the next year, then America. The book started to get a small following in Europe. But the real explosion happened after World War II, when his work was published in America. That's when his reputation just went global.
And you can see the result right here. It's one of the most incredible stories of posthumous fame, maybe ever. While Kafka was alive, his reputation was, well, nothing. 10 years after he died, it was starting to grow. And today, he's a legend, an undisputed literary icon. And that brings us to one last really interesting question. Kafka literally gave us a word, Kafkaesque, for that uniquely modern feeling of being trapped in some bizarre, nonsensical system you can't control. So, if Max Brod had done what he was told, if all those manuscripts had been turned to ash, would we have ever found the right words to talk about our own modern anxieties? It's impossible to say, but it's something to think about.